Hello everyone and welcome back to another AFK Journey video. In this video we're going to be talking about the AFK Journey Pride Win, PvP and Dream Realm tier list because Mikola has been out for a week now and I think it is a pretty good time to revisit and go through the tier list. So I will be mentioning which heroes I disagree with their placement, and I'm going to try to briefly explain the positioning, especially of the top ranking heroes, because these are going to be heroes that you're probably going to want to invest in onto your account. So I want to try to explain at least the top like S and S plus tier heroes in a bit of detail so that you can understand why these heroes are good and why you would want to be investing into them. Okay, so let's begin with the damage dealers. We have Diona, Lily May, and then the other four. So in my opinion, out of the 6 heroes they put in the S plus tier, the only ones which should remain or belong in the S plus tier are Diona and Lily May. Diona is a hyper carry, and if you can set him up and protect him, give him the buffs he needs, he can nuke down enemy teams and clear them on his own. I think he is one of the top tier damage dealers in the game right now, and you can run him into pretty much any team if you have a good setup. Lily May is one of the best PvP heroes in the game, and she has become better than I even expected. A lot of people are running her even on their arena defense, Supreme Arena defense of course, and on offense she is one of the go-to picks. The reason why I think she's so strong, on defense she has that RNG factor to her, because if people run, even if for example they run an Iron to take the first Lily May interruption, you don't know who she's going to be interrupting next, because based on the course of the fight and how energy regeneration is going to play out, she could be interrupting any one of your key heroes, and that could be the game-winning interruption. And also, on top of that, Lily May has a lot of damage. With a Rainstorm Ballet, she becomes untargetable and invincible during her cast. So she's actually kind of difficult to kill, even though she is a glass cannon type hero. So that is why I think Lily May belongs in the top tier. She does counter Iron on defense to some extent. I don't think that she is a hard counter to Iron, because Iron can potentially get off his second ultimate cast, but she is a counter to him. Now the other 4 heroes, Arden, Burial, OD, Val, of course these are going to be top tier damage dealers, but not in the S plus tier. I think they would be moved down to the S tier because you cannot run these heroes into any defense you find. Like, there are going to be some defenses which are just not like valuable, or OD is not going to be the greatest option to bring in. But for Diona and Lily May, like if you have a team built around them, you can take them to pretty much any defense and you can beat them. And they are also both pretty good options on defense. Lily May is better than Diona on defense in my opinion, but still both can be used. So that is my opinion about all of that. But the other 4 are still great, and they are priorities for you to invest in, but just not on the same tier as Diona and Lily May. Now for the specialists, we have Carolina, Iron, Scarletta, Taylene. So the only 2 which I think should remain in the S plus tier are Iron and Scarletta. Carolina and Taylene should move down to S, because let's talk about Carolina and Taylene. They are both really hard-hitting mage damage dealers, and if you protect them, they can get off their value and they can just shred through teams. But the thing is, they are also very susceptible to being killed. So if you're running them on defense, people are going to try to take advantage of that and kill them quickly. And then the other thing is, they're just not always going to be the best option to even be running on offense. There are a lot of other strong heroes you might want to be running, and they're just not always usable. So even though they are great mage damage dealers, I don't think they're on the top tier of PvP in the current meta. So I would move them down to the S tier. They're not as flexible as the other heroes we have in S plus tier. Now we have Iron and Scarletta. These both should remain here, and even though Iron is countered by Lily May, like I mentioned, if he can get his second ultimate cast, he can still group up enemies, still get the value from their mobilization. He is very tanky. It's difficult for you to kill him before his second ultimate cast. And of course he will synergize even with Lily May. Like if you have Iron and Lily May both on the same team, Iron can immobilize enemies, Lily May can interrupt enemies. It's a really oppressive type of team combo. And yeah, and so overall Iron is still a top tier PvP hero, S plus tier, and still something you should be building up on your account. Scarletta is, in my opinion, the best hero in the game, not just out of the specialists, but out of every hero in the game for PvP. She is a top. She provides the shielding and the tankiness for your team while she is up in the air, or for your weakest ally. the one with the lowest HP ratio, and when she comes down, she is a massive kill threat. If she has enough surviving allies, she'll be dealing true damage, has a potential of knocking off enemies off the battlefield and just wiping up the team. And she will synergize really well with Iron, because Iron can group up the enemies for Scarlita to use her combo on top of them all and try to knock them all off at the same time. So Scarlita is a top tier PvP hero. I don't think she's going to be leaving the S+ tier for many months to come. Like, there would need to be so many changes and so many newer, like, overpowered heroes for Scarlita to be bumped down below S+. Now for supports, we have Damien, Haywin, which I do agree with. These are both top tier PvP supports. Now Haywin is for a more stall oriented team. She has a damage reduction when she casts her ultimate with her Mythic Plus ability, and she has massive healing for your team. She is best used in Scarlita oriented teams, or any teams that you need that protection and that stall factor. Even in diurnal teams, she can be used because she can protect the team. So you can protect the diurnal with her ultimate cast. So she is a top tier stall oriented basically damage reduction support. Damien is going to be also top tier PvP support. He also provides healing. He doesn't provide damage reduction, but he provides haste. Up to 50 haste if you have his plus 10 exclusive equipment. And that haste buff is massive because that allows you to cast your skills more frequently, actually 50% faster. And also it allows them to have a 50% bonus attack speed. And this is pretty big. And then he also has crowd control in this kit. He can stun the furthest away enemy with his toy airplane, and he can his paper airplane, and he can also blind enemies in an AoE radius who are in the front line when his chariot explodes. And he can keep respawning the chariot, so he will count as a surviving ally for Scarlita really effectively. And then Rainier is a hero which in some places he can be great. And just like, for example, Carolina, Taylene, Vala, Odie, all of these heroes, in certain cases, they can be even the best option. But you cannot bring them into every team. That is my major reason why I wouldn't put them to the S+ tier. They're a bit not as flexible as the heroes that we have in the S+ tier. Because Rainier, if the enemy positions their defense on a map that cannot be, that has no symmetrical tiles, it's not going to be a good option for you to run Rainier. So that is why he's an S tier hero. He is great when he can get his value, but if he can't, then you're probably better off running different heroes. Now we have Thorin. Thorin is probably the best PvP tank in the game. He has multiple lives, he has a soul pack to protect one of your allies, and he has the massive kill threat, which is with his damage reflect. Honestly, a Thorin on his own in a stall-oriented team, Thorin, Haywin, Damien, that alone can be intimidating enough that people might not know how to deal with him. Because if he gets a powerful damage effect, like for example, he's the only hero tanking all of the damage from the enemy team, he is bound to kill a couple of heroes, and that could be enough for then the team to just stall out and get the victory. So Thorin is the top tier tank. Granny and Freyasto are also pretty good, and in some cases they may also be S+ tier, but I do think, yeah, Thorin is the most flexible of all the tanks and can be run into pretty much anything. Now moving down to the S tier, we have Elsa, Floribel, Sylvina. I pretty much agree with that. All are great, pretty good damage dealers. Sylvina is great if there's a symmetrical tile and a priority target you want to assassinate, but she is counterable, of course, with non-symmetrical tiles or grouping up heroes in the back so that she cannot reach her priority target even if she jumps onto it. And that happens as well, and she can be countered with things like Damien, like she would hit her first strike onto Damien would have no effect because he's spawning his Troy Chariot at that point. Floribel is good in more stall-oriented teams to get value from her summons of her minions, like teams using maybe Freyasto, Floribel, Burial, Haywin type teams. And then Elsa is great in crowd control teams, but she is a little bit susceptible because she will jump into the middle of the battlefield, like with her ability cast, and that puts her in threat of being killed. Whenever you have a mage or a kind of not so tanky hero up in the middle of the battlefield, like right at the front line, they can somehow just die from damage reflective of Thorin, from aggro from some of the backline heroes, from some AoE damage. So that is the major problem with Elsa, but she is good in full crowd control teams with like Iron, Elmis, Elsa type combos, but we'll talk more about that when we come to Elmis. So for the specialist, Igor Shakir. Igor I don't think belongs in the S tier. He is decent, like for Graveborn stall teams, he can be annoying. And he has some kill threat, some kill pressure onto the backline heroes, but I would move him down to A tier because he's very easily countered by OD. OD will plant the execution mark onto Igor, and then Igor will just die once he goes below that HP ratio, because Igor needs to be like surviving and jumping around the field to be annoying, but if he can be executed by OD, he gets pretty hard counter. Shakira is a top tier PvP hero, and he's become even better in my opinion because he has that damage reduction for your team when he's in his wolf form. He can cast into his wolf form really quickly at only 800 energy instead of like 1000 energy normally needed if you have his Mythic Plus. And that is really powerful. And if you have his Mythic Plus at plus 10 exclusive equipment upgrade, then you can even give the attack buff to your allies, damage reduction, haste buff. He is really difficult to kill when he's in the wolf form, and he can also shred through enemy wilder heroes pretty well on his own. He's great in melee-oriented teams to take advantage of his haste and damage reduction buff. However, he's pretty hard countered by Lily May, because if you only have Shakira on your team and you don't have anyone else to take the Lily May interruption, he's going to be the first hero to cast the ultimate, and he's going to be interrupted. And if Shakira's first ultimate gets interrupted, it's really bad for him, because when he's in his human form and not in his wolf form, he is not effective. Like, the value from Shakira is in his wolf form. When he's in his human form, he's also pretty easy to kill. So if you have Lily May to interrupt him, that can just buy enough time for your team to kill him. Almas is also hard countered by Lily May because not Almas himself, but the thing about Almas was you needed Almas with an Iron, because Iron would immobilize enemies at the beginning of the fight. Almas would prolong the duration of that immobilization by controlling them for longer, rooting them for like an extra 3 seconds, and then you'd have Arden in the team charging up energy the whole time because the enemies are immobilized. And then Arden will cast his ultimate. Arden will also control the enemies, and also will deal the massive damage to controlled enemies with her rock pillars. So that was basically the crazy crowd control team comp of Iron, Almas, Elsa, Arden. Lily May completely shuts it down because Lily May is going to interrupt Iron's first ultimate cast. So there's not going to be that all of this snowball effect of the crowd control from Almas is not going to happen until like Iron can cast his second ultimate, and by that point maybe the team is already dead or there are not enough surviving allies. So that is why I think Lily May kind of hard counters Almas more than even Iron, because Iron himself is tanky. He can be used in a lot of different teams. It doesn't have to be purely crowd control nuking teams, but Almas was really only using crowd control nuking teams, and he was a really strong option. But if you can deny the initial Iron ultimate, then you're not going to be able to get off this combo at the beginning of the fight, and then the team could die. And then you have the support, so Coco, Mikola, Rowan. So here we have Mikola, which is probably what a lot of people are waiting for, and I can definitely agree with Mikola being the S tier, maybe in the A tier, because the issue with Mikola, she is amazing if she can survive the whole fight. If you can guarantee that Mikola will survive throughout the entire fight, she could maybe even be an S plus tier support, because she has a haste buff for your team, she has a range defense buff, if you have control on arena, you gain the attack buff for all of your team, pretty high attack amount, she has that periodic healing, she has the vigorous call for the healing on her and 2 weakest allies, and the massive defense boost, like even more of a defense boost than the Rowan super potion. So she has a lot of good things going for her, but because she's a melee supporter and she only has a range of 1, she runs into the middle, to the front line of the battlefield. She is susceptible to Thorn damage fleck killing her, Scarlita descent and combo killing her. Any sort of backline heroes she could be taking aggro from them, that could kill her. And on her own, she usually doesn't have enough healing to sustain the whole team. You'll still probably have to run another healer along with her. So these are kind of the issues with Mikola. And that is why she's limited in how good she can be in PvP, because melee supporters are just, it's really difficult because they're not going to be tanky, like as tanky as a tank. So they're not meant for being in the front line. And then you need like a perfect positioning or somehow a team that doesn't have the kill threat onto her to make her to her full potential. So that is why she isn't the greatest option, because she is easy to be killed. That limits her in PvP. But in Dream Realm, it doesn't limit her, because you know you can with enough healing, she is not going to die to the Dream Realm bosses, and then she can get off all of her value. So Rowan and Coco, I do agree with this. Coco is a top tier PvP support for that damage reduction, shielding as well if she's at Mythic Plus. Her along with Haywin, Coco and Haywin on the same team, gives you so much damage reduction that you basically have a window where you're almost unkillable, and then you just have your opportunity to work down the enemy team. So I really like Coco in PvP, and of course Coco is a top tier Dream Realm hero as well. So Coco as an 8 level hero is one of the best 8 level heroes in the game overall. Because both Dream Realm and PvP. And now Rowan, he has energy generation, allows you to cast your ultimates faster than the opponent. That can be a big advantage. He gives that potion for like instant health recovery for single target, like the allies which are taking the most damage, and the super potion gives them defensive stats as well. So he has a pretty good support, but again, he is not going to be as top tier as Damien, Haywin, and Coco. Because that first ultimate cast, you would think that would be enough to win the fight, but it really isn't, especially when people have really well built up PvP teams and they have like tankiness in them, they have the healing from Haywin, then that first ultimate cast will not guarantee you the win, and then maybe you're just better off running a support like Damien or Haywin instead of the Rowan. So that is the thing. Like basically Rowan is competing against Damien and Haywin, who are just better than him. And then Granny and Freyasto. So Granny and Freyasto are both really good tanks. Granny is great because once she goes below 50% health, she gets a burst of healing and defensive stats, which gives her like massive tankiness. She also has a crowd control from her ultimate to root down the enemies. She can counter Thorns because she can tank out the Thorns damage pretty effectively. She has a factional advantage. So that is her main use. Freyasto is great because you get 2 heroes for the price of 1. The Illusion has the same stats as the original Freyasto. So they're both very difficult or tanky and difficult to kill, and especially if they're positioned on the same line, they gain even additional tankiness. So Freyasto is best in those Floribel, Burial type minion summoning teams, with maybe a Haywin or Damien for healing and support. Those are really the teams where Freyasto will shine. But you can use him as a tank option instead of Thorn. He also has a Crimson contract to give some buffs to your backline heroes. Now for the A and below level heroes, I'm just going to very briefly go through them because the major heroes you want to be focusing on and investing in are going to be the S and S plus tier, and these are your top priority. Now the A and below tier heroes, these are not basically going to be a priority for PvP. But maybe if you're building them for Dream Realm, for example, or you're building them for something else, you can make use of them if you don't have the above tier heroes. So Brian, Cecia, Seth, and Viperion as the damage dealers. If they are invested in, they are all decent damage dealers, so I do agree with it. The major issue is Seth is not really, like Seth, Satrana, Soren, these are all A-level Mauler heroes. You're going to be very kind of confined on which A-level Mauler heroes you'll go for, because Odie and Coco are going to be must builds for both Dream Realm and PvP. They're better even in PvP than these heroes. So once you're fully done with them to Supreme Plus, then you also have other options like Antandra, Kruger for Dream Realm, Antandra for AFK stages, and as a great tank for PvP. So you don't really have much time to even think about working on these other A-level Mauler heroes. And because they're only A tier at best, it is kind of not like a priority. So that is that. But Brian is good. He has some crowd control. He has stuns in his kit. He can even take the first enemy Lily May interruption. So for example, if you're running Shakir, then you could also have Brian there to take the interruption, but then you also need a crafter team that has synergy. So it's not just, you don't want to use Brian just as a piece to take the first Lily May interruption. You should have a team built around it, and Brian does well into crowd control teams like Iron, Brian, Ulmus. People run things like that, or even Damien to sustain the team. So he's not a bad option if he's invested in, and if you've built him up, but he is not going to be as top tier as the other heroes we've mentioned so far. Okay, let's move on to the specialists. So Soren and Satrana, I wouldn't really recommend building these heroes. Definitely not Soren. Satrana and Seth, I mean, Satrana and Seth are both fine, but again, they're competing for the A-level Mauler slot, and so I wouldn't recommend it. Parissa is decent as well as a damage dealer. She also buffs up your team, and if she can survive for long enough, she can nuke down enemy heroes, so she's not a bad option. And Tunisia, I would maybe even move Tunisia up to the S tier, though Tunisia is a really strong hero, especially with her seasonal skill, because it causes adjacent allies or adjacent enemies to take more physical damage. So in Vala, Lightbearer teams, or Tunisia Vala alone, it can be a very strong combo for Supreme Arena defenses and even offense. For the supports, we have Ludovic, Smokey, and Nero. Ludovic is a pretty good support, a lot of healing. He has stuns as well with the Supreme Plus on his Everbloom field. He does well with Viperion because Viperion deals damage at the cost of his own health, but Ludovic can keep him topped off in the health, so that can work. He can do well in Graveborn teams, so Ludovic arguably even could be up to the S tier for PvP. Nero, people don't really use that much. Again, you're probably going to be building Viperion and Sylvina, and then you don't have the opportunity for Nero, but as a kind of support Graveborn hero, you can try to use him. Smokey and Mirki, you're going to be building up probably for Dream Realm, and he's good in Mauler teams, like in Supreme Arena defense, a lot of people run him. The attack and haste buff, the massive sustain from his healing, and if he can survive for long enough, he can even cast his empowered blue aura at Mythic Plus to deal high damage to enemies within the range. On Tundra, Brutus, Lucius. Yeah, I mean, all of these belong probably here. Brutus maybe could be up. But yeah, I think Brutus overall is an A tier kind of tank hero. But Brutus and Antandra, especially think about pairing them up with Shakira or maybe even Mikola, because they're all frontline melee heroes. They're going to get the advantage of the Lupine's aura buffs from Shakira, or the Mikola haste buff, because she's also a melee hero. Antandra is really tanky. Brutus has the invincibility. Both are pretty good options. And yeah, definitely their best partners are Shakira and Mikola. And Lucius is going to be like, he has shielding in his kit, he tanks kind of well, or decently, and he has a good seasonal skill of damage and haste buff to your team if you survive for long enough in the battle. But for Arena, he's not really the greatest. He has more like Dream Realm uses, but for Supreme Arena, definitely you can run him on your Supreme Arena defense. He is not a bad option. Now moving down to the B and C tier, these are heroes pretty much you're not going to be wanting to run on your in your PvP. However, Reese is a hero which is pretty strong. Should go even to the top of the A tier. Like, I don't think he's a priority to build because, for example, Shakira and Elsa are more important, and those are going to be the S level heroes you want to have on your wish list. But Reese is not bad either if for some reason you have built him up. He deals pretty high damage. He is uncontrollable in the beginning of the match. And he can also dodge skill shots of enemies because he moves back and forth. And he's pretty tanky, so he's pretty good at Mauler-oriented teams. He has a lot of damage output. Leica is mainly only good in teams where like you want to get the attack speed buff. It could be teams with Diurnal, although in the Diurnal teams, Leica is not even the most preferred option anymore. Like having Damien for the haste buff and Haywin as well for the protection is just more preferred compared to Leica, because only that really you're getting from Leica is some defense reduction onto the enemies with their skills, and also the haste or the attack speed buff onto your allies, which is usually not enough. Because keep in mind, 50% haste, like 50 haste from Damien, is giving you 50% attack speed and 50% faster skill casting. Whereas like a Leica, even if it was 50% attack speed, you're only getting attack speed. You're not getting any faster skill casting. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, and the other heroes, like of course Corrin and Mare, they're great for Dream Realm, but in PvP they are not going to be great options. Although Corrin can be usable in Supreme Arena, maybe move him up to the A tier. And Lumont probably move up to the B or maybe even A tier as a tank for PvP. He's not bad, but he's not going to be the greatest option. Okay, so we're done with the PvP tier list. Now we're going to look at the Dream Realm. Okay, this is the exciting part, because definitely, yeah, so Lily May is a top damage dealer, and before I said that I still think Corrin, Merrily, and Odie should be up there with Lily May in the S+ tier, but looking at it again, I think at least Merrily and Odie should be in the S+ tier. Maybe not Corrin, because right now in the top tier endgame teams, I think Corrin has been pretty much replaced, other than maybe in Necrodraken. Maybe he's even been replaced there. Lily May is replaced, yeah, so, but I think Merrily and Odie still have a place. There are certain Dream Realm bosses where Odie and Merrily are still the best heroes to be run. And maybe before Endless Mode happens, Odie could maybe still be the top tier damage dealer like before. Maybe Lily May won't be as good as she is currently. So, because Endless boss modes are different to the beginning of a new season bosses you're fighting. So Odie and Merrily should be up to the S+ tier, maybe Corrin down to the S tier, but still probably all three are going to be priorities for your account. But I could imagine you, like, if you have Lily May built, maybe skipping on Corrin. I could imagine that. Okay, for the specialist, we have all of these heroes. Interesting. Now, okay, now Shakir will have to be moved up either to S or S plus tier, because if you look at the top performing Dream Realm teams, we made a video on it yesterday. 2 of the teams use Shakir in the top scoring endgame boss teams. Previously, Shakir was not as great, but Shakir is now, with Mikola, I think there's a lot of synergy. And Shakir should be moving up to the S or maybe even S plus tier. But for the teams before you get to the endgame stage with like Freyasto, Mikola, all of these heroes built up, then Shakir probably won't be the best option for you. But Cassidy is never the best option, so Cassidy should be moving down. Kruger, Scarlita, Temesia. Now for Necrodraking, Temesia is a pretty key hero, and for Snowstomper as well. If you don't have like the dream endgame team, you can run Temesia there. And Kruger can be run in Necrodraken, and in early stages before the endless boss mode, Kruger is pretty good. And this can also serve, for example, like if you don't have all of these heroes to Mythic Plus, Kruger is still viable before Mythic Plus as the physical defense debuffs. But Cassidy, Taylene is good. Taylene is the top performer in the King Croker Dream Realm boss, but only that one. Other than that, she is not the top. So I would keep her in the S tier probably. Cassidy I would move down to the A or even honestly B tier. She doesn't have a major place anywhere in the Dream Realm bosses right now. Scarlita, we can keep Scarlita in the S tier, but we need to move Shakir up to the S tier. I don't think the S plus tier, because Scarlita can be used in a lot of Dream Realm bosses, but she isn't like the top performing Dream Realm hero, and the Shakir has been the top performing. So Shakir up with Scarlita, Kruger in the S tier, Temesia in the S tier, Cassidy down, Taylene stays in the S tier, Cassidy down to, okay, we can take it to the A tier. Okay, Ludovic also to the S tier, because for the King Croker, or for the Alpha Bear boss, actually he's the best option, and even in other bosses along with Taylene, he can be a pretty high damage output option. So Ludovic up to the S tier. Now Mikola, Coco, Smokey, yes. Definitely Smokey and Mikola, these are the top 2 supports in the Dream Realm overall. So these 2 belong in the S plus tier. Coco, Rainier even, yeah, should remain in the S plus tier, because there are a lot of teams that Rainier can work in to get a high damage score. Currently, Rainier's using 3 out of 6 of the top performing endgame Dream Realm boss teams, which is lower than you would expect, but still, if you don't have all those heroes built up, Rainier is probably going to be the best option in almost all of the teams. Coco is great for the damage reduction and protection of your team, so yeah, these can all remain in the S plus tier. Then for the tanks, we have Thorin, Freyasto. Freyasto should be even maybe a tier. Like, if I wanted to restructure this, I would keep the S plus tier, but then I would make an S plus plus tier, or triple S tier, or whatever it is, S plus plus. For S plus plus, I would have Lily May, Mikola, Smokey, Freyasto, maybe Rainier as well. And then, yeah, a lot of these other heroes would remain in the S plus tier. So these heroes are top, and Thorin for the debuff onto the boss with the Soul Plunder increases the damage the boss receives. He has multiple lives. You can use him in King Croker if you don't have, for example, Taylene to tank out the insta-kills of King Croker, or Freyasto, plus 15 exclusive equipment for his illusion to tank it. And even in that team, you still need Thorin. So Thorin is great overall in Dream Realm. Yeah, now as for the other heroes, Lucius I would probably move up, because Lucius with his seasonal skill is pretty good in Dream Realm. He has a damage and haste buff, and he has protection for your team. There are some teams where you can run him, and he is the best option if you don't have other heroes built up. But, so I might move him up to the S tier. Ludovic in the S tier, Shakir in the S tier. These other heroes here, Vala... Okay, now Vala and Floribel, they can be used in the Snowstomper Dream Realm boss if you have them built up, and maybe you don't have, like, Corin Merrily built up yet. Vala can be usable. So Vala, Floribel, I think belong in the A tier. These other heroes, Elsa, Brian, Cecia, Reese, Seth, these are not really going to be good Dream Realm heroes. Maybe if, for example, you don't have any heroes at Mythic Plus, then you could try running. Definitely Cecia is fine. If you don't have, like, you're an early new game player and you don't have Mythic Plus upgrade of heroes, then Cecia would be fine, Brian, all these heroes would be fine. But if you have Mythic Plus upgrade of, like, let's say all of these A-level heroes, the ones which shine the most are Floribel, Vala, Shakira, of course, moves up, Ludovic, and Lucius. So those should all be a tier above, I think. Once you get them to Mythic Plus, Vala, Floribel, Shakira, Lucius, those are going to be really the better options for Dream Realm. And then looking down the list, the other heroes here are not going to be pretty much usable at all, although Leica was used in one team that we made a video on that. There was one Dream Realm boss where someone used Leica. Nayla used Leica and got a top, like basically competing with Scarlita, basically replacing Scarlita for Leica, but it only worked for one of the Dream Realm bosses. The other bosses, it wasn't really a good option. But yeah, overall, Leica doesn't have great Dream Realm uses, so I wouldn't recommend building her up for that. Sylvina, though, she did have in Lone Gaze. Sylvina, if you don't have Scarlita, Sylvina is your best option for Lone Gaze, so she should move up at least to A tier. And is there anything else that we're missing? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, guys, so that is going to be it for the PvP and the Dream Realm tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know what you think about this in the comment section down below. The useful thing about doing these videos is for people who are newer to the game, or if you're thinking about which heroes to invest in next, even if you've been playing for a while, this can give you some information about what should be your next priority for PvP, what should be your next priority for Dream Realm, and you can just go based on the tiers. For example, like, if you don't have all the S+ tiers built up yet, probably you should try to focus on those. If you don't have all of those built, then you can focus on the S tier heroes and like that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video. And until then, everyone, peace out for now.